When the United States launched trade wars and slapped tariffs on Canadian goods, Canada didn't fold, it pivoted. It built new trade deals across the globe, reducing its dependence on the United States. These 10 countries helped Canada bounce back stronger than ever. Number 10. The European Union. When US tariffs slammed Canada's exports, Canadian businesses needed a backup plan. Thankfully, one had already been signed years earlier, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, with the European Union. With 27 powerful economies, the EU offered Canada a huge opportunity. And the results? Canadian exports to Europe shot up over 25%. Everything from Atlantic seafood to Ontario aerospace parts found new markets in cities like Paris, Munich, and Rome. Even small businesses in British Columbia and Quebec began shipping goods to Europe. Items like maple syrup, precision tools, and even baby food. EU nations also started investing in Canadian green technology and sustainable farming. While the US raised walls, Europe opened its doors. Number 9. Indonesia. Most Canadians wouldn't have guessed that Indonesia would become a major trade partner. But with over 270 million people and a booming middle class, Indonesia quickly rose on Canada's radar. In 2024, Canada and Indonesia signed a major agreement, the Canada-Indonesia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. This unlocked new paths for Canadian grain, natural gas, and educational services. Indonesian companies also began investing in Canadian tech and clean energy. Today, Canadian agricultural products are filling Indonesian supermarkets, and Canadian firms are expanding into fast-growing cities like Jakarta and Surabaya. For Canada, this wasn't just a smart move, it was a necessary one. When Western markets grew uncertain, Canada turned east, and it's paying off. Number 8. Ecuador. Ecuador isn't a giant economy, but for Canada it became a key part of a bigger strategy, building strong trade networks in Latin America. In early 2025, Canada signed a free trade agreement with Ecuador, its 16th worldwide. Why Ecuador? It's rich in natural resources and sits in a strategic spot for Pacific shipping. Now, Canadian fertilizers, machinery, and software are flowing into Ecuador, while coffee, fruit, and textiles head north to Canadian stores. But the bigger story is this. Canada now has trade deals with 5 Latin American countries, forming a growing network that bypasses the US. In other words, Ecuador is a stepping stone, not just to trade, but to long-term independence from American policy swings. Number 7. China. Despite rocky political relations, Canada and China have kept strong economic ties. In fact, trade has quietly expanded in recent years. In 2024 alone, Canadian seafood exports to China reached $1.4 billion. Lobsters from Nova Scotia and crab from British Columbia are popular in Chinese restaurants and homes. At the same time, China continues to buy Canadian wheat, oil, and minerals. And while tensions exist, both countries benefit from the trade. Chinese investors are involved in Canadian clean tech, and Canadian universities host tens of thousands of Chinese students. So how does this work despite political issues? The answer is simple: mutual benefit. China needs stable resources, Canada needs high-volume buyers. When governments clash, business often finds a way forward. Number 6. Japan. Canada found a dependable partner in Japan, one with a strong economy and stable policies. Thanks to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, Canadian exports to Japan grew fast. From beef and wheat to aerospace and clean energy, Japanese demand stayed strong even during global uncertainty. What stood out most? Japan's interest in Canadian food. High-quality pork, wheat, and blueberries found eager customers in Tokyo and Osaka. At the same time, Canadian firms entered Japan's trillion-dollar electronics market. This wasn't just a trade deal, it was a deep economic partnership. Japan provided what Canada needed most during the tariff storm: reliability. Number 5. South Korea. Canada's agreement with South Korea, signed in 2015, became more valuable than ever during the US tariff disputes. When the US made trade unpredictable, South Korea became a reliable buyer of Canadian goods, especially beef, seafood, lumber, and industrial materials. In fact, South Korea is now Canada's 7th largest trading partner. There's more. Korean car and electronics companies began sourcing raw materials like Canadian lithium and cobalt for batteries and EVs. At the same time, Canadian firms tapped into Korea's advanced research, helping fuel collaboration in AI, robotics, and renewable energy. This is what happens when two tech-savvy countries decide to build something stable. The partnership isn't just about money, it's about shared ambition. Number 4, Mexico. While the United States raised tariffs, Mexico offered something different, a smoother path forward. Under the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, Mexico became a surprising but vital ally. In 2024, Canadian exports to Mexico hit $12.4 billion, mostly in agricultural goods, aerospace parts, and advanced manufacturing tools. But the real story? Canadian and Mexican businesses started working together more closely than ever. They formed joint ventures in auto manufacturing, electronics, and even food processing. As Mexico's factories grew, they needed supplies, and Canada filled the gap the United States left behind. This wasn't just regional trade, it was a strategic alliance forming right under America's nose. Number 3, Philippines. Canada didn't just chase big economies, it also built powerful ties with rising countries like the Philippines. With over 100 million people and a strong connection through immigration, the Philippines became a natural partner. In 2024, Canadian exports to the country jumped 35%, hitting $2.3 billion. Top exports include meat, wheat, and fertilizers. But the relationship goes deeper. Filipino companies are investing in Canadian agricultural technology, and Canadian schools are welcoming thousands of Filipino students, fostering trust and long-term collaboration. In a region filled with geopolitical competition, Canada found a peaceful path, quietly expanding its influence in Southeast Asia, one relationship at a time. Number 2, Vietnam. Vietnam is one of Canada's fastest-growing trade relationships, and it's no accident. Since both countries joined the CPTPP, exports have exploded. In 2024, Canada shipped over $1.6 billion in goods to Vietnam, including beef, lumber, and energy tech. Why Vietnam? Its economy is booming. Its middle class is expanding. And it's looking for new partners beyond China, and the US Vietnamese tech companies are also investing in Canadian clean energy. And more Vietnamese students are studying in Canada, laying the foundation for future cooperation. What began as a small trade increase has turned into a full-scale partnership, one that's helping Canada anchor itself in the heart of Asia. Number 1, Australia. Among all of Canada's global partnerships, none has grown more steadily or quietly than its relationship with Australia. The two countries have similar values, strong economies, and are both part of the CPTPP. Since 2018, bilateral trade has grown over 30%. In 2024, Canada exported $4.2 billion worth of goods to Australia. We're not just talking about food and fuel. Canada supplies advanced mining equipment, pharmaceuticals, and clean technology to Australia. And Australian investors are helping fund Canadian innovations in climate tech and green hydrogen. Canadian universities now run joint programs with Australian schools, sharing knowledge and boosting student exchanges. Together they're building billion-dollar industries in sustainability and energy. This partnership doesn't make headlines, but it's quietly transforming the future. Canada didn't just survive the US trade war, it used it as fuel to go global. These 10 countries became new lifelines, making Canada's economy more resilient and less dependent on any one nation. The next time a crisis hits, Canada's already ahead of the game. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories on how nations adapt and win.